Hello and welcome. Today we'll be discussing the political compass and some of the main ideologies in each group. Now, you may be wondering what the political compass is, and as a matter of fact, it's quite simple. If you're looking at the compass, it appears like so. A 4-quadrant plane that looks like a graph plane, with each quadrant having a specific color. The following quadrants are what we will be discussing in today's video, and they each represent the economic stance and government authority based on any one location on the plane. This is represented as the more right your political position is on the compass, the more economic right you are, meaning capitalism, and the more left of the center line you are, the more socialist or communist you are. As for the vertical, the higher up you are, the more power you think should be in the government's hands, with the very top being a dictatorship style with no rights, and the further down you are, the less power you think the government should hold, which at the max would be anarchism. Each quadrant also has infinitely many more ideologies, which we will be discussing in some of today's videos on the most neutral stance possible. Also, just note that the compass can and does go beyond the two-dimensional plane to encompass more ideals, but we will just be focusing on the basic two-dimensional plane for this video. Without further ado, let's get into it. Quadrant 1, which, for the purpose of this video, will be representing the red quadrant of the compass, known as authoritarian left. This is the quadrant that is mostly known for the likes of China, the Soviet Union, and North Korea, but it goes beyond just that. Quadrant 1 is a section of the compass in which the economic policies are leftist, which is the socialist realm. What this essentially means is that, different from Western societies, capitalistic economies, socialism aims to bring about equal and fair workers' rights, with property and businesses being controlled collectively and not individuals. Usually these would be controlled by the state, but it can also be a community or workers. Socialism also aims to lessen social hierarchy and bring about total equality. It also aims to support welfare and to make services like healthcare and education provided by the state and not privately owned. On the more extreme side of the quadrant, there is one where the attempt at a democratic utopia for the workers stops, as is with communism. Communism is basically the more extreme form of socialism, as it aims to completely remove social classes, all private property, and all resources being controlled by the people and being distributed equally. Communism has never worked, however, and will never work, as a government that controls everything in a centralized system is bound to lead to dictatorship and over-dominant control. As for the authoritarian part of authoritarian left, this means that people in this quadrant still believe in centralized government, which has structure, power, and control. This government is like that of Western society in it being present, has authority over policy making, and exercises those policies in the country. However, it shan't be mistaken that the policies, structured, and methods of these governments are nothing at all like Western society. The authoritarian left's ideologies vary on the other hand. Starting off with one of the more prevalent modern ideologies of authoritarian left is laborism. Laborism is more of an idea and a movement than a full-on ideology that could run our country, as laborism is the foundational ideas of what unions and organized labor groups believe in, and is a type of class conflict where the workers are fighting against the upper class for fairer treatment. They mostly advocate for higher wages and better working conditions. Laborism is also relevant in political parties' campaigns, but the parties don't run the country as a socialist state and instead just gives more support and policies towards workers' union demands. This is why the UK Labour Party is not actually Labourism, because the UK is a capitalist country and doesn't run on Labourism when Labour is in power. A little bit deeper into the quadrant lies Castroism, which, as the name suggests, is the ideas of the government run by Cuban dictator Fidel Castro. Castroism advocates for the strong unity of a nation, while also running on the ideas of public property, in which the state owns land to benefit the nation. The ideology was also very militaristic and supported the Soviet Union. The ideology itself is not actually that authoritarian or leftist, and lies on an intermediate position in authoritarian left. On a much more extreme level, the authoritarian side of Quadrant 1 is National Bolshevism. National Bolshevism is essentially the fascism of the left, which we haven't talked about yet, but what it means is that it holds a lot of beliefs and ideas that can be racist and exclusive to only certain people, and also has a total dictatorship ideas, permanent government, and oppression of fascism, but has total communistic economy, where everything is controlled by the state. This is also known as red fascism, and was used in Russia during the Russian Revolution, and was first used for the KPD, which is the Communist Party of Germany. Moving on to the next quadrant of the compass, we have Quadrant 2, which is the authoritarian right. In most political compass diagrams, this quadrant is usually coloured blue or purple, and represents systems where the government holds strong authority while the economy is organized around capitalism or private ownership or corporatism. Economically, the right side of the compass generally supports private property, markets, and businesses owned by individuals or corporations rather than the state. This means that in these systems, economic power is often concentrated in private hands rather than controlled collectively by workers or communities. However, what separates authoritarian right ideologies from libertarian ones is their belief in a strong centralized government. Governments in this quadrant tend to emphasize order, national unity, hierarchy, and obedience to authority. Civil liberties may be restricted to maintain stability or enforce national goals. One of the most well-known ideologies that falls within this quadrant is fascism. Fascism developed in the early 20th century and was most famously associated with the government of Benito Mussolini in Italy and Adolf Hitler in Germany. Fascist systems typically combine strong nationalist beliefs with an authoritarian state, where political opposition is suppressed and government exercises strict control over society. While businesses may remain privately owned, the state often directs them towards national goals. Another ideology sometimes associated with the authoritarian right is absolute monarchy. In this system, all political authority is concentrated in a single ruler, usually a king or queen, who governs without democratic limitations. Historically, many European states operated under absolute monarchies before modern democratic systems developed. There are also other ideologies in this quadrant that emphasize national strength, traditional hierarchy, and strong leadership. These ideologies often argue that stability, national identity, and economic growth are the best achieved through strong centralized authority, combined with a market-based economy. In more recent times, some modern political movements have also been associated with positions closer to the authoritarian right quadrant. These movements often emphasize strong national identity, strict immigration policies, and centralized leadership, while still supporting market economies. One example often discussed online is the America First movement, which focuses on prioritizing national interests, border control, and economic protectionism. Some related online movements, such as Save Europe, promote similar ideas centered around nationalism and cultural preservation. These movements often operate through online communities, political commentary, and activist groups, and are sometimes associated with controversial political commentaries, such as Nick Fuentes. Next, we move down the compass to Quadrant 3, which represents the libertarian left. This quadrant is typically colored green, and it combines left-wing economic ideas with a strong emphasis on personal freedom and limited government authority. Economically, libertarian left ideologies still support many ideas associated with socialism, such as collective ownership, worker control, and reducing economic inequality. However, unlike authoritarian left systems, libertarian left movements generally reject centralized government control. Instead, they often favor local democracy, cooperative organizations, and decentralized decision-making. One ideology commonly associated with the quadrant is libertarian socialism. Libertarian socialism argues that workers should collectively control their workplaces and communities while minimizing centralized authority. Supporters often believe that democratic organizations such as workers' cooperatives or local councils can manage economic systems without the need for a powerful state. Another ideology that falls within this quadrant is anarchism. Anarchism is one of the most extreme examples of libertarian political thought, as it argues that all forms of government authority should be removed. Instead of a state, anarchists believe that society should organize itself through voluntary cooperation and mutual aid between individuals and communities. There are also other ideas within this quadrant, such as democratic socialism and syndicalism, which focus on worker participation, economic equality, and social justice while still supporting strong personal freedoms. In general, the libertarian left quadrant combines two major ideas, economic equality and individual liberty. It represents systems that seek to reduce hierarchy and economic inequality without relying on a powerful centralized government. In the modern world, libertarian left ideas are often connected to grassroots activism and decentralized political movements. These movements frequently emphasize civil liberties, social equality, and skepticism towards centralized authority. Many modern libertarian left activities organize through community groups, online networks, and protest movements that advocate for issues such as worker cooperatives, environmental protection, and expanded civil rights. In recent years, some activists associated with mutual aid networks and decentralized social movements have been discussed as examples of ideas that fall within this quadrant, emphasizing cooperation between communities rather than top-down government control. We have arrived at Quadrant 4, which is known as Libertarian Right. This quadrant is typically colored yellow, and it represents ideologies that support both economic freedoms and limited government authority. Economically, libertarian right systems strongly support capitalism, private property, and free markets. In these systems, businesses and economic activity are largely controlled by individuals and corporations rather than the governments. At the same time, libertarian right ideologies also argue that government power should be minimal. Supporters often believe that individuals should have as much freedom as possible in both economic and personal matters, with government only existing to protect basic rights such as property, contracts, and security. One ideology often associated with this quadrant is libertarianism. Libertarianism emphasizes personal liberty, free markets, and small government. Libertarians generally support policies such as low taxation, deregulation of businesses, and strong protection for individual rights. Another idea sometimes placed in this quadrant is minarchism. Minarchists believe that the government should exist only to perform a few essential functions, such as maintaining courts, protecting property rights, and defending the country. Beyond these roles, they argue that society should operate largely through voluntary exchange and free markets. Some more extreme positions within the libertarian right include anarcho-capitalism, which proposes that even services like policing and courts should be handled privately rather than by the government. Overall, this quadrant emphasizes the idea that individual freedom and economic markets should be prioritized over government control. Modern examples of libertarian right ideas are often connected to movements that promote free markets, limited government regulation, and individual liberty. These ideas are commonly discussed in technology communities, cryptocurrency spaces, and some political organizations that advocate for reducing government intervention in the economy. In recent years, some modern movements, such as the cryptocurrency advocates and decentralized communities, have also been associated with libertarian right ideas because they support systems that operate independently of traditional government control. Before we conclude the video, it is also important to briefly discuss some of the criticisms of the political compass and why it is still used today. While the political compass can be a useful tool for understanding political ideas, many political scientists argue that it is also somewhat limited. One criticism is that the political compass only uses two dimensions: economic policy and government authority. In reality, political beliefs are often much more complex than that. For example, factors such as culture, religion, nationalism, environmental policy, and foreign policy do not always fit neatly onto just two axes. Because of this, some critics argue that the compass oversimplifies political ideology and may place very different beliefs in the same quadrant, even if they disagree on many issues. Another criticism is that the political system in the real world do not always match perfectly with the positions shown on the chart. Governments and political movements often combine ideas from multiple axes of the compass, which means that the compass should be seen more as a general guide rather than an exact measurement of political beliefs. However, despite these criticisms, the political compass is still widely used today because it provides a simple way to visualize political differences. Instead of thinking about politics as only left versus right, the political compass shows that disagreements can also involve how much power people believe government should have. This makes it easier to understand why two people who both support capitalism, for example, might still disagree strongly about the role of government authority. In this way, the political compass helps people compare different ideologies and better understand how political beliefs relate to each other, even if the system itself is not perfect. Another interesting aspect of the political compass is that a person's position on it is not necessarily fixed. Political beliefs can change over time as people gain new experiences, encounter different ideas, or respond to major events in society. Political movements and entire countries can also shift positions on the compass over time. Because of this, the political compass should not be viewed as something that permanently labels a person or a nation. So as we can see, the political compass divides political ideologies into four major quadrants based on two main questions: how much economic control the government should have, and how much authority the government should exercise over society. The authoritarian left emphasizes centralized authority combined with socialist economics. The authoritarian right supports strong government authority along with capitalist economic systems. The libertarian left promotes social equality while maintaining centralized power. And finally, the libertarian right prioritizes individual liberty and free markets with very limited government involvement. It is also important to remember that political beliefs are rarely perfectly located in one quadrant. Most ideologies and political systems exist somewhere along a spectrum, combining ideas from multiple positions on the compass. The political compass is therefore not meant to perfectly define every political belief, but rather to serve as a tool for understanding how different ideologies compare to one another. Thank you for watching this project video, and I hope this explanation helped you better understand the different political ideologies and how they are related to the political compass. Goodbye.